Is that okay, Mark?
Yes, that's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Any other questions about the consent agenda items? If not, then Mr. Mayor, we'll turn it over to you, and you're welcome to call the meeting to order.
We'll call the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask Jim Heffern if he'll do the invocation, and Martha Stowe if she'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you in challenging times. We pray for all those who have lost their lives due to COVID-19. We also pray for those whose physical health, mental health, and livelihoods have been affected by the pandemic. We pray for those who put their own lives at risk caring for victims of the pandemic. We also pray for all those who have been affected by the tragic events in Minneapolis. We ask for healing and solace for those feeling hurt, helpless, feeling fear, anger, or frustration. We pray that those who wish to give voice to their feelings are able to do so safely and peacefully. Finally, we pray for our own community as well as other communities across the state and nation. May we learn from this time of sickness and strife, listen to each other, and may our leaders have the courage to work together to effect meaningful change. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Ms. Martha?
Hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
To the flag
of the United States of America
of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
justice for all. Okay. Next, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I would motion to approve the with the changes.
Do we have a second?
Well, let's just make sure. I'm assuming, Richard, we kind of lost you, that the motion was to approve items 1 through 5 of the consent agenda and move item 6 to item 1A on the regular agenda.
Are you having trouble hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Richard?
Can you hear us, Richard? Somebody's having a problem with their.
Yeah. Seth says Martha's double joined with her audio, so I've muted her computer.
Okay.
I think she's available. Can you, Martha, on the
Hi.
phone?
On the phone.
June,
Phone's it's the computer that's the problem.
That might be Martha's.
Yeah.
Don't you just love technology?
Yeah. All right. Well, will someone and we're trying to get Richard back. So would anyone else care to make the motion regarding the consent agenda?
I will move to approve items 1 through 5 on the consent agenda and move item 6 to item number 1A on the regular agenda.
All right, we have a motion. Where is that? We have a motion to approve items 1 through 5 in the consent agenda and move item 6 to item 1A on the regular agenda. I think we need to do a roll call vote. we'll wait for Richard since he's still get back in, I think. Ryan, we might have lost. Well, I vote yes. Mark,
Yes.
yes. Martha. That's a yes. Okay. And we're trying to get Ryan. Are you there?
Yes, Ryan's here.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Martha. We are going to. So if you can hear Martha, Seth said to eject her from the meeting so that she can log back in, and hopefully the audio problems will be fixed. Richard, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. So we made the motion and seconded it. And do you approve of items 1 through 5 on the consent agenda and moving item 6 to 1A on the regular agenda?
I do.
Okay. So that passes unanimously then. We managed to take care of that. Thank goodness. So public comment, and I understand that Martha is trying to log back in. But again, as we have done the last several meetings with public comment on teleconference, because we're not meeting in person, we have provided citizens with the opportunity to provide public comment by email to the city clerk up until 5 p.m. Today, and then any comments received will be read by our city manager, Adrian Miller. Do we have any public comments to be read into the record, Adrian?
Jamie, I have not received any. Have you received any public comments?
Just the one from Dave Baker.
Okay, and that was specifically for the budget public hearing. So we don't have any comments for item 1.
Okay. Then should we wait while Martha logs back in, or should we proceed?
Let's proceed.
Okay. Then item 2 on the agenda is an update on COVID-19 in Gaston County. And for that, we have Chris Dobbins by phone of that update. So thank you for joining us, Chris.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. I'll do my best to try to pay attention to the chat side of the meeting to see if there's any questions as I go along. Appreciate the opportunity to meet with the council tonight. Appreciate Adrian reaching out and asking for an update. But I have to say, I heard a comment earlier in the meeting that really does kind of paint a picture for all of us to ponder how big of an issue really is the virus. Certainly, we have a lot of things going on, but it does cause our citizens pause when one day it's important and captures 95% of the evening news, and the next day it's an afterthought and maybe gets a footnote of the evening news. What I will share is I think we've done such a really good job locally in setting out to flatten the curve, and I know a lot of us are tired of hearing that. But what the challenge is when you do address a pandemic well is you get the comments and the questions of, did we overreact? And certainly that's a very valid question. It's a very valid point to consider. If we do the job well, we will certainly always get that. I think we did the job well. And I've said this on numerous occasions that I feel like I would much rather be criticized for doing too much than trying to explain why we did not do enough. So kudos to the community, kudos to leadership like yourself, kudos to our hospital system, our local clinics, our local healthcare system as a whole, mental health, all of the above, for really, I think, taking this serious. Then the challenge becomes, what's the, I guess, the balancing point or the tipping point to moving forward and kind of getting back to and I use air quotes here without a camera, normal. I do think that's a challenge. And, you know, it's one of those daily debates that we have within our own agency. Do you lock everyone down forever to get to zero? Or is there an acceptable level of living with risk? And I certainly believe that's another great question, open for debate, depending on where you are on the spectrum. But again, I go back to where I started. I could not be more proud or more appreciative of our community taking this serious very early on. Because we did that, we did not have what you would consider excessive spike in cases or hospitalizations. So on the other side of this, you will not have the significant decline, if you will, in cases. So I think that's one of the things that people are trying to process and trying to really kind of get their collective minds wrapped around. And, you know, how serious is this? I am comfortable in saying what I'm about to say. I think we have very clearly identified our most vulnerable populations. I think we have done a admirable job of protecting them. Definitely our senior citizens, our citizens with several underlying health conditions, and our underserved population are our greatest risk. I think that what you will see beyond that is you will see people become ill. You will see people not enjoy being ill, and then you will see people recover from being ill. So that's a very lay interpretation of where we are. But until we develop a vaccine, you're not going to get to zero. It's going to continue to circulate through our community. What I'm, I guess, excited about, but saddened to say I'm excited about, is more and more people tell me they wash their hands. I'm not so sure that's a statement of something I should be proud of, but it's encouraging because it really is at the core of what we need to do moving forward to minimize the spread of any virus. It doesn't matter what the name or the type of virus, but the more, I guess, day-to-day practical things that we can do will minimize that. I'm a huge sports fan. I cannot wait for sports to get back to what I would consider, being an escape from our day-to-day. But we're going to have to look at sports differently. We're going to have to look at attendance differently. We're going to have to look at graduations differently, restaurants differently. I think as long as we continue to do that, we will be better on the other side of this. You know, where we were 3 months ago is not where we are now. I feel like we are in a very good position. We have what I would consider two canaries in the cave. We have the hospital system. Our local hospital, Caramount Health, has been an incredible partner through this. They've given us daily updates on their capacity and ability to for beds, their ability to take patients on, their absolute all-in approach to reducing elective surgeries to provide more hospital beds for our community. When we see a spike there, that's one canary. The other canary in the cave, if you will, is our percent of positives. And what that is we've increased our testing significantly. So you're going to find more positives. What we're paying attention to is the percent of positives of our test. About 3 weeks ago, we were upwards of 8, almost 9% of those tested were testing positive. We are now somewhere in the 5% range. So even though we're testing more and finding more in our community, the percent of positives is plateauing and or declining. So we're encouraged by that. What's next? Good. And I think that's the real question for all of us is, what does this look like going into the summer? And is there going to be a phase 2 of this or a second wave of this, if you will, in the fall? For those of us that study history and look at history, the Spanish flu had a very significant second act, and that was not something that we want to repeat. So we're paying very, very close attention to that. But until you have a vaccine, and unless your community is paying attention to the social distancing and hygiene and recommendations of wearing a mask, that give the possibility does exist. One thing that I do try to help our citizens understand is we are not built like New York City. We're not built in skyscrapers. We don't share multiple transportation, transportation systems like the subway. Their mass transit system, if you will. A lot of our citizens have their own individual transportation, so there's social distancing in that by itself. So we're not exactly comparing apples to apples, no pun intended, but I do think that the things that we need to pay attention to are very similar to what New York is trying to pay attention to. Keeping your hospital system open, having the ability to flex up, and having a sufficient amount of personal protective equipment to your first responders, your healthcare workers, all of those individuals that will be the frontline staff in responding to this. Belmont is a shining example of taking this seriously. Adrian and his staff and yourselves have all been very much on board with approaching this from a very professional, a very logical, very educated position point. As I'm sure most of you have seen and or been a part of, unfortunately, politics also becomes part of the equation. What our job is as healthcare professionals is to help our elected leaders understand the consequences of not doing certain things. Beyond that, I'm not really able to affect politicians the way maybe sometimes I would like to. And I certainly understand individual rights, and I understand wanting to get back to normal and moving businesses forward in our community. I would be remiss if I didn't signal out and cite Belmont as one of those areas, municipalities, if you will, in Gaston County that has really kind of led the way through this. And I think your leadership, Adrian's leadership, and your citizens' compliance and support of our recommendations has been huge in moving us toward moving the needle in a positive direction. I'll just say that. This summer, we've been talking with our Health and Human Services staff in Raleigh. We're comfortable in that we believe phase 3 is not too far in the distance. We believe phase 3 will really be a very large step in moving toward normal. We have established and are putting together a task force to start thinking the fall, talking about the fall, and things that we can be doing proactively to prepare for our quote-unquote cold and flu season, which is typically October, November, December into the new year. So we're hoping to use the best and the brightest to help our citizens for what that may look like. One of the challenges is not always just public health input. There is a term called will of the people that we pay attention to a lot. And there is a tolerance level by which our citizens will continue to move forward or say they've had enough. And there's a balance there, and we have to continue to pay attention to that needle, and we are. And I think that's the reason for the task force, is to make sure that we're connected. And above all, I'm going to use the word that we talk about every single day, and it's trust. Our community needs to trust the decisions and recommendations that we're making, that they are in the best interest of all of us, just businesses, not just the faith community or whatever segment that you want to necessarily identify. It's in the best interest of all of us, and I think we've got that under control right now. But it's also a very what I would consider a moving target, and you need to be paying attention to that. And that's part of our advice that we give to our leadership at the county level. I certainly understand our municipalities have been put in some positions to make decisions, to support or not support decisions, politically, governmentally. It is unprecedented on so many levels. And, you know, some of the things that you see on social media, I think maybe one of the best analogies is this might be the big game of Jumanji that any of us have ever played. And, you know, what's next? We thought, okay, we get through May, maybe June will be okay. Well, clearly last week and the beginning of this week has given us even more cause for pause, given some of the other things that we deal with. But I guess that's the big picture of where we've been, where we are currently, and where we may be going, and again, the indicators that we're paying a lot of attention to. I think the challenge for a lot of us, I know it is for me, is how much of the news do I pay attention to, and how much of the news do I let go? And it's important to stay informed, and we certainly need to do that. But we also do not need to be living in fear until it is time to live in fear. So all of us have very challenging jobs to communicate that. Our constituents, our citizens, our neighbors, our families, everybody is probably looking at this through a little different lens, but we need to appreciate every single one of those viewpoints is important. You need to account for that in your messaging. So I will take a breath there and see if there's any questions from the council.
I have one, Chris. This is Charlie Martin. Out of the people that have
Yes,
passed
sir,
away, I
Mr.
think
Mayor.
there was 7 that died. 7 that
Yes,
died.
sir.
How many people were over 65 or 70 years old?
Yes, sir. I don't have the actual number. I'm going to go out on a limb and say 90% were over the age of 60, but I will tell you 100% had underlying health conditions. So
Okay.
even our under 65 losses had significant health issues that they were dealing with. And, you know, it's one of those things that I struggle with as a healthcare professional where, you know, if you have heart disease or diabetes and, you know, you've been dealing with health issues for a significant amount of time, and then all of a sudden, you get a cold or you get a flu, and then you expire. Then they credit the flu with your cause of death. I saw something the other day where a young person was very fortunate to live to be 100 years old, and got the virus and passed away, and they attributed the cause of death to COVID-19. We should all be so lucky to be 100 years old and die to COVID-19.
Yeah.
So having context with a lot of this is also important. So your question is great, and it's absolutely on point, Mr. Mayor, and I salute those of us who ask the little deeper questions, because I think that paints a little better picture and gives you more context. Again, every single one of our losses, every single one of them was unfortunate, and a family member is now no longer with us, and that's very sad. But giving it total context, every single one of those losses had significant health issues that they were dealing with at that time as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Question, Richard. You touched on phase 2 of this COVID outbreak possibly during the winter and decided to finish flu. What is Gaston County doing to prepare for that possibility?
Adrian, I'm sorry, that was broken up. Can somebody repeat that for me?
Chris, I believe Councilman Turner was asking, you had referenced a second wave of COVID-19 maybe this fall or winter, and what is Gaston County doing to help prepare for that potential second wave later this year?
Yeah, great question. I may have mentioned it earlier. The county manager is actually putting together a task force, multiple partners to create a think tank, if you will, of things that we can start planning for the fall. My hope is that there will be an desire to get to your closest CVS or health department or wherever to get your flu shot. That's number one. Will it be possible to have a vaccine by then? That may be overly optimistic. But also what I'm hoping is some of the now common measures that we're familiar with masks, with social distancing, with hygiene, with not going to work if you're ill or feeling ill. Hopefully those measures will become more common practice, and that too will be a thing of normalcy, so that will help us ease through or flatten this year's cold and flu season. Our hope is that we will know more in 3, 4, 5 months from now, and that we will be even better informed, more prepared. My suspicion is the same at-risk population will still be the same at-risk population. So preparing them, taking care of them, responding to them, hopefully will protect them better going into next fall. But it's kind of like, coming into 2020 back in January. If somebody would have told me we would be doing what we're doing right now here in June, then I would have probably been very, I wouldn't have believed it. It would have been impossible to see all of the things that we've done and had really thrown at us. So I'm being cautiously optimistic. I think we are an incredibly resilient community. As I'm sure you are all aware, the Republican National Convention is still scheduled to be in Charlotte. So there's a lot of things that could potentially impact us here locally that we're just not necessarily thinking about. But again, that's the reason for the task force, is to think outside the box and hopefully be well prepared going into the fall.
I can't even fathom the number of people that are breaking into these places with the close contact they're having, how that's going to affect them with this COVID-19.
Yes, sir. From what I've seen on television, they're not doing very well with the social distancing.
No, not at all.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Chris.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, and thank you to the council for allowing me to have some time with you.
And Chris, this is Adrian. I just want to say, on behalf of all of us that have been working with you, appreciate your leadership and everything that you and your staff at the county have done these last several months. It's been tough, and it hasn't always been popular, but I appreciate your leadership.
Yes, sir. Right back at you. Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, we spent 10 minutes voting on the consent agenda and moving item 6 to item 1A, and then I promptly forgot that we did that. So we need to, I apologize for the oversight. We need to go to what has been deemed item 1A, which is the approval of a memorandum of understanding with Belmont Trolley, Inc. And I understand we have Ron Lovelace from Belmont Trolley, Inc., who drafted the memorandum of understanding, and I understand that we have some questions regarding it. So I don't know if there's anything, Adrian, anything further you need to present, or if we should just have any questions or discussion from council.
I would just open it up to questions, and Councilman Seelinger wanted to pull it, so I guess we could start with him. And Ron, you're on mute, so if there are questions directed toward Ron, just please unmute yourself before you answer.
Okay. So I just would like to see some. I'm kind of open to how exactly this, or what exactly this looks like. Pending our discussion here, but I would like to see possibly some benchmarks associated with the release of payment in this MOU. I feel like since we last saw this, or last talked about this in March, a lot has changed with the coronavirus, which I think increases the risk associated with this project pretty significantly. I know they were looking for some funding from the Tourism Development Authority, and I know their budget's going to be under a lot of stress. I imagine that private fundraising for something like this is going to be more challenging than it was 3 or 4 months ago, especially the way people are very kind of concerned about public transit and that sort of thing these days. So, and I know there were also some pending discussion or agreements with DOT regarding the actual rails. And I know that DOT is just a mess right now. So would kind of like to just see us institute some benchmarks here to make sure that we're not getting, I guess what I don't want to see happen is that the city becomes the only entity that is fully committed to this project. So that we're in a situation where we put $300,000 into something and it either just languishes or doesn't happen, or, you know, it's just, there's a lot of unknowns right now. So I think that having some benchmarks around like either fundraising targets, negotiating agreements with DOT, getting an operating agreement with the city for when the building is actually finished. And then also kind of like what we did with the Chronicle project, having some sort of clawback mechanism in the event that, you know, it just falls apart, you know, that the city and the taxpayer are not kind of left high and dry. I don't think that these are really anything that, you know, as long as the project is successful and proceeds more or less according to the plan that was presented to us, you know, 2 months ago, would really inhibit progress very much. But you know, I'd be kind of interested to get some input from the rest of the council on this.
Richard, did you have any, or should, I don't know if, how we should proceed, if Ron wishes to respond to that particular question, or if we should, Ron, did you have any thoughts? And then I know Richard, I think, has some questions as well.
Sure, I'll leave it up to Richard if he wants to pile on now, or let me respond to that and then he can go. It's up to him. I'm happy either way.
Okay. Richard, did you have any questions that you wanted to bring up?
Mark touched on some of the concerns that I shared with him on this. I think at this point, I'd like to hear what Ron has to say. And at that point, after that, I'll make any additional comments.
Ron?
Sure. No, those are good questions, and they're questions that I tried to anticipate as much as I could when I drafted this. I mean, listen, this is not what I do for a living, drafting these memorandums of understanding. So I don't claim that it's perfect, but as it relates to benchmarks, I mean, listen, I built in the ultimate benchmark, and that is your right to walk away for any reason at any time. And that's section 2, paragraph 2 of the memorandum of understanding. I mean, my view, just to level set, this doesn't work without your cooperation. This doesn't work without the city being completely invested and on board and our partner in lockstep. The DOT wants you all involved. We need you involved. You've actually been involved to a fair degree all along, and it's been incredibly helpful. This falls apart without you. And so that's why I put in section 2, you know, you can terminate at any time. And so my vision of the way, listen, you give us the 60 grand now, we go out and we'll give you an accounting anytime you want of where the money's going, but we're going to use it for the design and the engineering, et cetera, for the project. We're going to have to come back to you before next year, because that's when the second slug of investment will come up. And if we don't tell you a story that you like next year, you can terminate the agreement. And it's as simple as that. So we can build in whatever benchmarks you want, but I actually think it would be cleaner and easier for you to leave it to the next city council and the one after that to use their discretion at that time to judge the facts on the ground and the progress that we've made. Because it's, as you've seen over the last 2 or 3 months, progress is not linear, and things happen that we don't all understand. And so putting benchmarks in here might unnecessarily tie our hands. I'm fine trusting your judgment and your wisdom in a year to look at what we've done with the money and see whether we've been good stewards or not. And I open it back up to further questions at that point, but that means my response is, I find you have nothing to discuss. And that's why I didn't build benchmarks in. If you'd like to talk about them, we can, but again, you all are given in this agreement as it's drafted ultimate discretion next year. It's the next, or to terminate entirely and be done with the project.
Ron, let me ask you a question. I think I understood you to say this. Each payment that the city each year, are you going to be coming and updating us at that time progress has been made to that point?
I think I understood you, Richard, to say, are we going to be coming? Am I going to be coming to every year? The answer is yes, and more often if you need it. Because we have to respect your right. If you wanted to terminate this agreement in 2 months, you can do it. So we need your cooperation. This is not my pet project where I'm going to own a company and run it to my benefit. This is in many ways my gift to my hometown. And that's how I see this. And I want to set up a structure that works long-term. And I think for that structure to work, the city has to be fully invested and has to be a partner, like I said, in lockstep. I would love nothing more than to give this city, my town, it's done so much for me, a $1.2 million event center right in the middle of town there at Greenway that transforms that area of town and dovetails perfectly with what's going on at the Chronicle, which is awesome. The work you guys have done there is terrific. Up to you for it. That's my goal and nothing more. And so that's why I built in. Nobody asked me to build it in, but I put paragraph 2 in, and the trolley was completely behind it for that reason.
Ron.
Can we put something in? Can we put something in there that basically says you will provide periodic updates at a minimum, once every year, and you came in March of this year, that at a minimum, at least in March of every year, to provide us updates and perhaps more frequently.
Great question, and Jim. I mean, any chance I have to be in a room or in a virtual meeting with Adrian Miller, I'm going to take it. So yes, if you'd like me to come back in a year or 6 months, I'm happy.
And would you be willing, as I read the section 2, either side can terminate? Would you be willing to make that a unilateral, so that it's our sole right to terminate?
Jim, I think that's a reasonable request. I can't speak for the whole board, but I would support it, and I think they would too.
Okay. And I do, and I don't know what the best way to approach this is, but I do think at a minimum, in regard to what Mark is saying, obviously, if the DOT doesn't give you all the land, there's going to be no facility on that site. So, I mean, that does seem like something I'd want, whether that is a condition subsequent pursuant to which, the agreement would terminate or whatever, but that does seem to be something that, or whether we need a force majeure clause or something like that.
I'm fine with any of that. I mean, it's no problem. It could be, I mean, as you said, we could build it in as a covenant that terminates the agreement in however many months. The alternative would be we could remember that in a year when we get back together, that's one of the most important things we all need to check off our list, among other things, including fundraising and all the rest. I'm happy either way and would gladly take language from you.
Yeah, thank you. Richard,
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem,
yes.
just a process reminder. Any agreement with Ncdot and Belmont Trolley and the city of Belmont on a lease or use of that facility will have to come back to the city council. So,
right.
So you will have that opportunity, prior to next March.
Okay. Richard, Mark, any follow-up?
I mean, I'd be fine with an annual check-in. That's if there's some way to tie that to our usual budget process, so that we're getting the check-in prior to having a vote on that year's appropriation. I think that would be fine. I think the clawback to me, I think, is pretty important, because I don't want, I mean, I don't see how that could harm Belmont Trolley with whatever it's trying to do now. But in the event that, something happens, I'd like to make sure that we are protecting the taxpayer in our pursuit of this project.
So just for my benefit, can you define what you mean by clawback? Like, to what extent would the clawback work?
Well, we instituted something very similar to what I'm thinking with the Chronicle project, where in the event that the building becomes unusable and they knock it down, we would be entitled to collect whatever monies we had paid to them in support of that, or not. Well, it was a tax incentive, so we would be entitled to collect whatever incentives have been paid out. So in a situation like this, would be looking for some sort of mechanism that would allow for the city to recover its losses in the event that the trolley is not able to go forward.
By that, do you mean, to the extent that this project dies in a couple of months and we have spent $45,000 on engineering and design plans, we have $15,000 left. You're going for the $15,000, is that right?
No, I'm talking about if we get to, 3 years down the road and we've paid out $180,000 and we still don't have a trolley barn, and we're not going to get a trolley barn, I'd like some way for the city to recover its funds.
What we can do, to start with the positive, what we can do is add something to the MOU. This would not be controversial to the extent that the project dies. Belmont Trolley can turn over everything that it owns to the city. I mean, it can turn over its contract to the extent it's allowed, any funds that remain from the public-private fundraising, to the extent it's allowed by our tax rules, which I think it would be, but I want to look into that more. But we'll turn over everything that we have back to the city, and that's no problem. As soon as the project has died and we're no longer working on it, we'll give it back. But to the extent that money has been expended for designs, and you'll get the designs and blueprints, but we can't. The money is gone. I mean, it's not there anymore.
Oh, I understand,
Ron,
but
already,
and Belmont Trolley will no longer have those assets.
Ron,
Yeah,
they've already
so
replaced some of the ties on the track.
Beg pardon? The ties on the track?
They've already replaced some of the ties on the track. On the trolley track.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah, the Ncdot, we've been working with them pretty closely, and they've gotten good enough signals about the prospects of success of the project, that they've come in and spent a fair amount of money cleaning up the railway between downtown and the terminus. So I think, yeah, I mean, they have, and they've done that in part on my word and Ron Presley's word, and in dialogue with the city. So they feel good about the success of the project, and they have. That's right.
Jim, this is Ryan. I just wanted to mention a couple things. First, I think the Chronicle project's different than this, in that the Chronicle project would have to be built out completely, then pay taxes to get their money back. So this is different. We're giving them money up front before the project's complete. So it's the clawback wouldn't work in that nature. Also, to what Ron was saying, there might not be the money there if this does fail. Certainly the money wouldn't be there if this fails. So what you're really looking for is who's the top tier asset collector, right? So if any business fails, you have banks that lend them money, and you have individuals that lend them money, and then you have equity holders, and there's all that stuff's ranked. And I think what Mark's looking for, and certainly not trying to put words in his mouth, but the city would like to be the first collector of the assets. And in my mind, it would
First priority.
Yeah, first priority. And so that seems reasonable, because we're going to have all the assets if it's successful. We might as well have all the assets if it fails. So that makes sense. And I think the 60 grand that we're going to put up now, it is at risk to a large degree. And hopefully the trolley board will be responsible in how they take those funds as part of raising their other funds too. But I think that number 2 bullet point, giving council the ability to walk away. I think if you put any other kind of structure there around, if you don't do this by 60 days, if you don't do this by 90 days, we're really just going to add a lot of angst for no reason. I mean, we've done that with trying to bulldoze some building, keep extending deadlines. I think we should just, set up where they come back and ask for the second contribution and the third contribution on an annual basis, and that council kind of outlines what the expectations are, and it's up to the trolley board to come back and to meet those expectations. And if at any point between there's a fallout or falling apart, it sounds pretty clear here that one party can at least walk away. But I'm supportive of it as it is, and I think if where we can add that the city of Belmont would be the recipient of the assets, if the board were to fold, that would make sense.
Since we are going first, I think we should be the first in terms of like the funding.
We're not first in any of their debt, right?
Now, and for the record, that's fine. I mean, there may be a point in time, because our payments are going to be structured 5 years, that we may need debt financing from a bank, right? That might prime things. But before we would do that, we would have to come back to you for your approval. Mm-hmm. And that's so, yes, I have no problem telling you, and that's what I intended to say a minute ago. I probably wasn't very eloquent with it, but that's the intent. Yes. To the extent that it falls apart, we can do.
I agree, with a lot of what's been suggested and said, but I don't know if I'm comfortable like making, one of the differences I think between this and Chronicle is, they're a business, that's their business trying to make the profit. If the company is on the hook, then perhaps the individual owners in certain circumstances could be on the hook. But you all are a nonprofit, and I wouldn't be comfortable like asking you all for like a personal guarantee or anything like that. But I am in agreement, I think, with the a lot of the gist of what Mark suggested. But I'd hesitate to go to that far, and so that we're essentially asking for some sort of personal guarantee from you all and the members of the board, because you are a nonprofit. Is that right? I'm assuming that's right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be looking for a personal guarantee either.
Yeah.
I think
Jim,
just. Sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
That's right, Jim. I look at the long-term benefits of this. If we have the trolley bar and an event center down there, and a number of other things that will bring people to downtown, especially the college students, because they got 2 more dormitories that are almost finished, and the hospital too. I think it would be an ideal situation to go ahead and approve the memorandum of understanding with this.
Well, let me. I thought I had a stray thought that crossed my mind, and then it went away. Martha, did you have any thoughts on this? Oh, I know what it was. We had spoken, Ron. I know, like, we have council members on some of the nonprofit boards, like Downtown Belmont Development Association, the Main Street Board, and this might be a question for Adrian and Parks. If we're working in this partnership and we want some insight into what the trolley board's doing, is it something that could we legally have a council member serve on the trolley board?
I don't know about the legal part, Jim, but Ryan Schrift and I have both been working with the trolley board for probably the last 4 or 5 years. And certainly we're not voting members. Councilman Schrift is sort of the liaison between the city council and the trolley board. And I've been on there in my role in terms of my relationships with Ncdot for the rail trail project. And so Councilman Schrift and I have been working closely with the trolley board. So we do have those relationships established and certainly can continue serving in that capacity if Councilman Schrift is willing to do that.
This is Richard. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think Brian, what I agree with what he said about, making Belmont essentially the first lien holder. I don't want to make this thing too onerous for Ron, his folks, because I think it's a good project. The fallback provision, I don't know if that's going to work because, as you stated, they're non-profit and there's really not going to be anything to call back. Ryan said money, putting it out there at somewhat at risk. I mean, it's a calculated risk. I mean, I've got Rob to see this thing through. A couple of provisions would demonstrate to Belmont citizens that we are exercising our due diligence in the use of the dollars. So, possibly adding a couple of additional provisions in there might be demonstrating that if is having any objections to any of them, we can figure out what those provisions might be.
Mm-hmm. Is this something? It seems like we're going to be adding some provisions to the agreement. Is this something we should say let's table it and come back and see what the agreement with the edits we've talked about looks like, and then decide on the agreement when we see those provisions? Or do we feel comfortable enough with what we've talked about, saying let's go forward with, make the amendments we've discussed, and with those amendments we discussed, we approve it?
Could we maybe?
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm fine with these minor adjustments if we can do them now. I don't see any point in extending, the process out any longer. These look, to make this Brian, and I don't know if the terminology is essentially the first lien holder. The owner, if it succeeds, why not be the owner? Else, I would agree with that. Those would be up, I guess, up to part and Ron to decide if they want to go back and if that's something that we can add by vote right now.
Mark?
No, I was having a little trouble understanding Richard. He keeps going in and out.
Yeah.
But what I was going to suggest was that, we do have a workshop on the 15th. We could amend or I guess they could work out the language in between then or now and then, and we could just vote on it then, unless that will. I know Richard was talking about making this as simple as possible for them. I'm not opposed to voting on it now if we're able to hash out the language now, but it just seemed like maybe in the interest of time, it might be. I'd have no problem with voting on it in 2 weeks.
So let me just say for Belmont Trolley Board, because I've talked to them about these issues, I have no problem adding a provision to the document that I think Jim Parks and I, mostly Jim and Parks because they're real lawyers, could come to an agreement on, to the extent that there is, failure of the project, the money goes to Belmont, period, full stop. I think that's the equivalent of what you're saying. First lien holder, not really a first lien because there's no debt, but you get the first, dibs on the asset. That's no problem. I also have no problem adding in any type of, information covenant, benchmarks, whatever else that is served up. So to the extent that helps, you're willing to, and I don't want to speak for Jim and Parks. I mean, they may not want this responsibility, but to the extent you're willing to trust them to hash out the language that you're talking about with us, that's fine with me. I can't imagine that you're going to suggest anything that we're not going to agree to, because for the reasons I said before, we need you. We need this to work for both of us, and we want you to feel comfortable. We don't have anything to hide, and we don't have any provisions that we would be afraid of. So I'm fine with that, but obviously defer to your process internally.
Well, what's everyone's sense? I mean, I'm fine either way. Voting on it now or deferring it till the 15th.
Yeah, this is Ryan. I think we just gotta vote on it now and trust that Parks can make the document reflect this conversation. And if for whatever reason it doesn't, we can always default back to item number 2 and resend. So I don't have this lengthy conversation. Maybe in a year.
Okay.
But so I'll make a motion. Do we need to come out of public hearing?
We didn't have a public hearing on this, so
Okay.
you can just make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the memo of understanding with the annual update provision and making item number 2 unilateral and having Parks work out some language to make us a first receipt.
The so-called first
assets.
lien holder, yeah.
Yeah, the first receiver of that. But those things.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that language. I'll second this.
All right, we have a motion made by Ryan, seconded by Richard. So we do need to have a roll call vote, as I understand our remote rules here. So we'll start with Councilman Schrift.
Yes.
Councilman Schrift says yes. Councilman Turner? Yes. I will vote yes. Councilwoman Stowe? Yes. All right. Councilman Seelinger?
Yes.
All right. It is a unanimous 5-0. Thank everyone for their time. Thank you, Ron, for staying a little bit longer. I think this was a good discussion, and that made some changes that are beneficial to the city. So thank you, everyone, for the discussion and the questions.
Thank you to the entire council for your consideration and partnership. It's going to be a great road from here. Really appreciate it. Parks, I'll be emailing you this week.
You bet.
All right, you're free to stick around for the rest of the meeting if you want, Ron. Otherwise, you can sign off.
I may leave it up just so that I can hear Adrian talk as I eat my dinner, but I probably.
Thanks, Ron.
All right. Well, we've managed to navigate through 1A, and since we did 2 out of order, thanks to my forgetfulness, we will now move on to item number 3, which is a public hearing on the city manager's recommended budget for fiscal year 2021. And since this involves a public hearing, we need to have a motion to go into public hearing.
I'll make a motion to go into public hearing.
All right, Richard has moved to go into public hearing. Do we have a second?
A second.
Mark seconds. I suppose we need to do a roll call vote. Ryan? Yes. Richard?
Yes.
I say yes. Martha? Yes. Mark?
Yes.
All right. We are now in public hearing. Because I guess before I turn it over to Adrian, I will explain a little bit of what and you all have probably seen some of this with the special rules for remote public hearings. There is an added provision in the statute that was passed by the General Assembly that says we will take public comments for this hearing remotely, and we need to allow up to 24 hours after the public hearing for additional comments. So we can't vote on this tonight. What we're going to have to do is we'll have Adrian give his presentation. We will hear any public comments that have been submitted. I think there is one. We'll ask any questions, have any discussion that we need, and then we'll, instead of going out of public hearing, we'll need to have a motion to continue the public hearing until 4 o'clock on June 3rd via WebEx, at which time we will read any additional comments we've received in the interim into the record and close the public hearing and then vote. Parks, did I summarize that correctly?
You were right on, spot on.
All right, thank you. So with that all in mind, I will turn it over to Adrian to present. Do you need me to switch anything over to you, or are you just?
Yes, I've got a presentation I would like to share.
Okay.
If I can.
Let me see. There, I think you should.
I'm now the presenter.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Can you see this PowerPoint?
No.
No. Okay. I think I have to minimize that. I've got to share content. Then I've got to press this button.
Yes. Now it's working.
Thank you. I'm learning. So, as Mayor Pro Tem Heffron said, our budget public hearing is a little bit different this year because of the remote process. So I will go over the presentation. This will be a condensed version of what you've heard me drone on and on about in our previous two budget workshops. And then we have one public comment submitted. We will hold the public comments open until noon on Wednesday the 3rd. If we receive any additional comments, we'll read those out loud at a recess meeting at 4 o'clock on Wednesday, and then you can take action. So with that, I will begin the presentation. So the City Council's goals for over the next 5 years focus really around transportation and mobility. You all have done an excellent job of managing the traffic the last 3 months, and so we may want to go ahead and check that goal off. But we do know
Mark and I will take credit for that. Within months of us getting elected, we've solved the traffic problem.
Yes,
you're welcome.
So assuming that you both fail in maintaining this traffic improvement, we do still need to work on transportation improvements and mobility, particularly pedestrian and bicycle mobility, because as we have seen the last 3 months, when you remove cars from the roadway network, mobility is improved. So that is one of your main goals, and then continuing to invest in our infrastructure, our parks, our recreation infrastructure, our transportation infrastructure, and certainly our water and sewer and stormwater infrastructure. And then growth management and balanced growth. Make sure that as Belmont continues to grow, that it maintains the character that those of us that were born here and raised here and stayed here, that's why we did it. And those of us that have moved here and have Belmont as a town of choice in which we chose to move here, and for the reasons we love, we want to keep that going. So we try to make sure this budget provide some of the tools to implement those goals and themes. Unfortunately, with the COVID-19 health and economic crisis, we don't have as much funding for implementation as what we had hoped, but I'll get into that in just a moment. The overall budget for all the funds is $25.7 million. This is a 0.5% decrease from the adopted budget, but alluded to this at the second workshop now that we're in the month of June, we've got a pretty good idea of where we're going to land at the end of the current fiscal year. And we believe that will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $28.5 million total for all funds in the current fiscal year that ends June 30th. So the proposed budget that would go into effect July 1st is an 11% decrease from where we think we're going to end up at the end of the current fiscal year. So the decreases are different in the different funds, but overall you're looking at about an 11% decrease next year from what we anticipate having raised and spent this year. As I mentioned, the difference in that is of course related to the COVID-19 economic crisis, particularly lower sales tax revenue projected and lower than planned property base increase, and therefore property tax revenue. As I mentioned, each time in the workshops, we have had guidance from our colleagues around the region, from the League of Municipalities and the UNC School of Government on what the COVID-19 crisis will likely do to all of our budgets at the state and local levels. So for the general fund for next year, the overall budget is just over $14.6 million. That's a 3% increase from the adopted budget this year, but it's a 6% decrease from the estimated end of the year. So as what we're going through now, when we propose the budget, you adopt the budget, that is our best guess of how much money we're going to raise and how much money we're going to spend in the next year. And then as we go through the year, we see how well we did with our estimation and our predicting of what's going to happen. And then at the end of the year, we amend the budget to reflect what actually happened. So what we anticipate is that we will spend 6% less in the general fund next year than we did this year. We would have likely, depending on how you wanted to handle the different revenues and expenditures, our proposed budget would have been close to about a 7% increase next year, were it not for the COVID-19 crisis. But this does start to make some progress on some of the long-term infrastructure and capital investments that you've been asking us to make. It increases funding in certain line items, reduces funding in many more line items, but it does increase funding for sidewalk repair. We're going to begin the design of the Abbey Creek Greenway, and we are working now to begin the design of the long discussed recreation center. We're going to be updating our 10-year-old pedestrian master plan. And that does support economic development so that we can build our non-residential tax base so that we don't have to burden our residents with the general fund. The revenue projections, in the property tax revenue, we anticipate this being about a 3% increase as opposed to a 5% increase is what we were banking on prior to COVID-19. That's about $8.7 million. We estimate that we will collect 3.5% less in sales tax revenue next year than what we are collecting this year. That's about $2.6 million. Utility franchise tax should be about the same. That's our third biggest source of revenue. We're keeping the solid waste, or recommending to keep the solid waste fee the same, $7. I did a preface this, not recommending any tax rate increase. So keep the tax rate at 51.5 cents per $100 of value. The solid waste fee, recommended to keep that the same. Our Powell bill revenue, and of course we've already discussed that earlier, that should generate about $320,000, assuming the state doesn't do anything different with that. We are going to make a budget recommendation that we would collect $80,000 from the ABC store and the ABC board next year. So as you can see, this chart shows the percentage of the general fund revenue that comes from the different sources, and 60% of our revenue is from property taxes, and that is the only revenue source that you have total control over. See, 18% comes from sales tax. That is totally dependent upon the economy and upon the state and county governments. And then we have some other revenue sources, but by and large, we are funded by property taxes. And looking at the property, so property tax has been really hard this year to estimate because of COVID-19. We've been pretty spot on in our targeted projections for sales tax in the last 3 years. We collected just over 100% of what we estimated. So we hit our targets and then just a little bit extra. This year, the economy up until the middle of March was just crushing it. And we estimate that we'll collect 127% of what we estimated at the beginning of the year. So that's why we felt a little bit comfortable raising the projections for next year, but certainly not as much as we're actually going to collect this year. And you can see this is a chart that Councilman Seelinger helped me make, comparing sales tax growth or reduction over the last 10 years between what Belmont has taken in and what the statewide amount has been. So we track right at the state average or a little bit above the state. So sales tax is a good revenue source for us. On the general fund expenditures, here's the total budget amount for each department. I won't go into these details, but you can see, as is always the case, public safety with police and fire are our biggest departments. They're capital intensive and personnel intensive. They also are a good investment, as both Chief Huggins and Chief Altice like to remind me. And so here's the percentage of the general fund budget of the various departments. You'll see that your debt management policy wants to keep the percentage of the general fund budget that goes towards debt service at or below 12%. This year it is at 10%. Here's the functional areas of the general fund. You see the salary, personnel cost on that blue line at the top, the operating costs in the red in the middle, capital costs in purple at the bottom, and debt service in green at the bottom. We have been trending downward on the percentage of the budget that goes toward personnel costs the last several years, partly due to cost allocating several general fund employees to water and sewer fund, splitting the cost of those employees if you do work that is in both funds. We had got to 47% 2 years ago, 46% this current year. That goes up to 49% next year, and that's primarily because the reduction in the overall budget. So reduce the denominator, so that makes the top number have a bigger impact. So that's the math lesson. And any more detailed math needs to go to either Michelle or to Councilwoman Stowe. But you can see that over the last several years, as we've invested in technology, learning best practices in other fields, the percentage of the budget that goes toward operating costs has gone down 33% down to 26%. So I would argue that we are operating more efficiently than we used to. And you can see that we are compliant with your debt service policy. And we have, as the city council has made very deliberate investments in infrastructure and capital costs, and we structured our budget to do that. You see that we have increased the amount of the budget that goes toward capital investment, 5% 3 years ago to 16% and now 13%. The general fund personnel cost, we are recommending a potential of 3% of total salary increase. That's 1% cost of living adjustment that will go to all employees, and then a potential of an additional 2% salary increase later this fall based on each individual employee's performance through their performance appraisal and evaluation with their supervisor. So that doesn't mean that we budget for everybody getting a 3%, but as we have seen in our experience the last 2 years, not everybody gets that. So we want to make sure that we cover our bases in the budget for it, but not everybody is going to get that. But in the past several years, this has been a potential 5% salary increase between the cost of living and the merit, but because of the budget crisis, we're reducing that down to a 3%. We're only asking for one new position in the general fund, and that is a deputy finance director to provide some assistance for Michelle. And that position, as I mentioned earlier, is split by the general fund and the utility fund. And we have a vacant street and parks maintenance technician position that has been eliminated. And I do want to thank our Human Resources Director, Deborah Brown, and her wellness team and committee of our staff and all the staff for taking their personal health very serious. We are doing more preventive work. We're getting physicals every year. We have our own personal doctor, and the hard work that we've done on wellness in the last several years is paying off. Our health insurance premiums are increasing, but only by 5%. That is certainly lower than what the market is. So that helps keep our personnel costs down. So that's it for the general fund. The general fund is everything that's paid for by property taxes. The utility fund is the water and sewer fund paid for by water and sewer revenue. That is just over $9.7 million. That's a 9% decrease from the current budget, which sounds like a lot, but the main reason is that this year we budgeted to take a little over $3 million out of the utility fund capital reserve to pay for projects. Our utilities director, Chuck Flowers, has done a good job of working with city engineer Jerry Hatton and spending money on capital investments in the utility fund. We think the next year we'll take about $2 million out of the capital reserve instead of $3. So that's the primary reason the utility fund budget has such a big decrease. The impact of COVID-19 to the utility fund is not as big as it is to the general fund. Although as people struggle to pay their water and sewer bills, that could be less revenue coming in. The governor's executive order that we not charge late fees or disconnection fees or disconnect anyone for non-payment has been extended through at least the end of July. We'll wait and see what happens then, but that will certainly have an effect on at least the first month of the new budget, and certainly it's going to have an effect on the tail end of this year's budget. But again, we have used guidance from outside of Belmont on how we should handle the utility fund budget. We appreciate all the input from folks at the state and local areas. For the utility fund revenue, 40% of the utility fund revenue is paid for by your water bill, 35% by the sewer bill, and we just have more water customers than sewer customers because we have several water customers outside the city limits. I mentioned we want to take $2 million out of capital reserve. That translates to about 21% of the revenue. And then the various other fees that we charge make up 5% of the revenue. And just as a quick pause, and just to reassure, particularly the newer members of the council, I mentioned that we're taking a little over $3 million out of capital reserve this year and supposed to do $2 million next year. If you read your audit book earlier I guess late last year, we have enough money in the capital reserve that we can afford to spend down some. And one of our previous utility rate consultants recommended that we spend down some of this cash. On the expenditure side, you see the various departments that make up the utility fund. And because we have been making cash investments in our infrastructure, we have very little debt. Only 6% of the utility fund covers debt service, as opposed to 10% in the general fund. We are not recommending any increases in the water and sewer rates for the second straight year. And we've made very, very, very modest increases in those rates over the past 3 or 4 years. But for the second straight year, we're not recommending any increases in the water and sewer rates. For the stormwater fund, we are recommending keeping that at that rate at $5 per residential unit. That puts the overall budget for stormwater at just over $800,000. That's a 2% increase over this year, but that's due to just natural growth in the number of customers, number of houses, number of businesses that are paying that fee. Again, the COVID-19 does not have a big impact on stormwater fund to the extent that people are still paying their fees through their utility bills. Here's a breakdown of the components of the stormwater fund: personnel, operating, debt service, and capital. You can see we have really shifted to make some capital investments to the fund. Almost half of the money in the stormwater fund goes toward capital next year. So just to summarize the process that we've used to get here, we received your input as the council earlier this year in your retreat to set the goals for the budget and the goals for the city. We took that into account when the staff made recommendations to their supervisors and department heads. Department heads sent that information to Michelle Wood. She and I worked together to see what we could afford to do. We're working on a really nice budget that was going to implement everything, and then COVID-19 hit. So we had to go back to the drawing board and do that. We are maintaining our current tax and fee structure. There will be some of the items in the fee schedule that will be modestly adjusted, but those are mainly just to cover the cost. These are for development related activities. But the water rates, sewer rates, tax rate, solid waste fee are all the same. Stormwater fee, still the same. We are making some investments in our infrastructure and for mobility purposes, continuing to modernize our water and sewer system, finishing out some big projects that have been in the works, like the improvements to the water treatment plant that are underway, some line improvements, but also our big project for the upcoming year is the elevated water tank for the South Point Peninsula that will help provide reliable water service and water pressure at the fastest growing area of town and to our out of town customers. So we are working on that as well. And this budget does continue to implement the 5-year CIP plan and the CIP, the 5-year budget. The City Council worked on this as, I believe, year 3 of that plan. So that, in a nutshell, is the budget, a budget message and an infographic that has more information is available in the City Council packet. It's also on the City Council website. So the next steps, as I mentioned, recess this hearing after you hear the one public comment we've received and you ask questions of me. Recess the hearing until 4 p.m. on Wednesday, June the 3rd. We will continue to receive any public comments via email until noon on Wednesday the 3rd. Then you can take action on the budget on Wednesday the 3rd. As we move into the new fiscal year, we will certainly be monitoring all the finances. And then this budget is too pessimistic on what's going to happen. And hopefully we can amend the budget upward if finances come in better than what we anticipated. But we certainly want to be very conservative in what we estimate. I'd rather be on the, as Christoph has mentioned earlier, I'd rather get criticized for doing too much and too little. And I would certainly rather be criticized for being too conservative on the budget and have more money at the end of the year than to be in the reverse situation. We will delay some of the capital purchases until we have a better handle on how sales tax is coming in over the next several months. And as our property tax revenue comes in around the holidays. So we have tried to front load some projects in the last couple of years. We're not going to do that next year. We just want to make sure that we can afford to do these projects and that the money comes in at least as much as budgeted and hopefully a little bit over. So, on behalf of all of our staff, I appreciate all their work. And we do recommend that you consider approval of the budget as presented when you meet again in your recess part of this meeting on June the 3rd. So with that, I will answer any questions you may have.
First of all, I'd like to say I think you've done a great job, your staff, trying to formulate this budget, because it's been a difficult time to do that, especially with all the stuff going on. But I just want to commend you on what you've done.
Thank you, Mayor. It's certainly a team effort, but I on behalf of all the staff, I appreciate that.
Any questions for Adrian? If there are none, then we do have one public comment to be read in the record. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. So this comment is submitted by the Tar Heel Trailblazers Rocky Branch Park Committee. That consists of David Baker, Mills Davis, Bruce Euler, Hans Kaufman, Sarah Kaufman, Will Washam, and John Wilson. And almost all of those are Belmont residents or Belmont business owners. And they submitted the following comment. On behalf of the Tar Heel Trailblazers organization and the Rocky Branch Park Committee, we would like to thank city staff and city council for all their hard work developing the fiscal year 2020-2021 city budget. We understand that there are a lot of needs and services vying for available funding, and this year was especially difficult with potential budget shortfalls due to COVID-19. We appreciate your continued dedication to public safety, maintaining and improving public infrastructure, and investment in our local parks and recreation facilities. As you know, the Tar Heel Trailblazers mission involves protecting, improving, maintaining, and adding trails in the Charlotte metro area. While our focus is to provide the very best possible opportunities to enjoy mountain biking, we also understand the importance of communities providing a variety of recreational facilities to enjoy. Past and future investments in the Davis Park tennis courts, Stowe Park renovations, Recreation Civic Center and Gymnasium, Davis Park playground equipment, Belmont Rail Trail, Belmont Rowing Center and Kayak Launch, Abbey Creek Greenway, and Rocky Branch Trail upgrades demonstrate the city's commitment to providing a variety of recreational opportunities which enhances the quality of life for the residents of Belmont. We look forward to constructing the trail upgrades at Rocky Branch Park so it can provide an inclusive recreation space for Belmont residents, enhance connectivity through trails, and promote recreational tourism for the city of Belmont. Thank you again for everything you do for Belmont.
Thank you. That being said, as I understand the rules, the council may continue any public hearing without further advertisement to a time and place certain, provided the time, including the date, if the hearing will resume on a different day, and place of the continued hearing are announced in open session. So I think it would be appropriate at this time to entertain a motion to continue the hearing, but the motion will need to reference the time and date and place of said continuance.
I would motion to continue public hearing until 4 p.m. June 3rd via WebEx.
All right. Thank you, Richard. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mark seconds. All right. Ryan, are you in favor? Yes. Richard? Do you vote? We don't see you, Richard. Are you there?
Should be.
Yeah. Your vote?
Can you see me? I vote yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you. We see you now. I vote yes. Martha? Yes. Mark?
Yes.
All right. So we have continued the public hearing on the budget until 4 p.m. Wednesday, June 3rd, when we'll pick it up again by teleconference. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have another public hearing on a request to permanently close portions of Centerview Street and Jade Circle. So again, the rules will be the same. We'll go into public hearing. I believe Shelley DeHart, our planning director, will make the presentation. We also have, I believe, Attorney John Russell, if he's still, yes, there he is, representing the developer. I don't believe we have any public comments. Is that still correct, Adrian?
That is correct.
Okay. And so at such time as we have asked all of our questions and discussion, again, we'll need to have a motion to continue the hearing until 4 o'clock on June 3rd via WebEx. But with all of that said, do we have a motion to go into public hearing?
I'll motion to go into public hearing.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mark seconds. Ryan? Say yes. I can't see you. Yes. We're good. Richard?
Yes.
I vote yes. Martha? Say yes. Mark?
Yes.
All right. We are now in public hearing. So I will, unless Adrian has anything to to preface things with, would it be appropriate to turn it over to Shelley?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Better job than I do.
All right. We will recognize Shelley DeHart, Planning Director, for the presentation.
Thank you. Can you see the screen with the PowerPoint presentation? You can? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. So now if I can make this move, let's give it a go. So as read into the record, this is a public hearing to consider the request to withdraw from public dedication 2 street segments in accordance with GS 160A 299. The streets are a portion of Centerview Street, which is 846 linear feet. It's highlighted here in yellow. The second segment is the remaining portion of Jade Circle, which is 255 linear feet. Both are 50-foot wide right-of-ways and currently maintained by the city of Belmont. So this request comes to us from the developers of the River West Business Park. You may recall that this light industrial business park was approved by Belmont City Council as a conditional zoning petition approved last November of 2019. The design included the future abandonment, again, of 2 segments of street in the north end. It would be the segment of Centerview Street, and then towards the west is the remaining portion of Jade Circle. So in keeping with general statutes, we're required to follow the process of 168-299, which I've outlined the timeline here. The city received a petition mid-April. The petition was presented to the city council on April 20th, at which time the city council approved a resolution setting the public hearing date to June 1st, tonight's meeting. Then on May 4th, the city council approved a modification, just changing the meeting location, not the date, the meeting location, in anticipating possibly meeting in person over at TechWorks. There was a newspaper legal ad ran for 4 consecutive weeks, all in May. You can see the dates on your screen, but I'll read them into the record, which is May 5th, May 12th, May 19th, and May 26th. There were 6 signs posted between Jade Circle and Centerview Street. We also mailed 2 public hearing notices, the first on May 7th, and then a second notice on May 20th, when we received word that there was an extended public comment opportunity with holding a virtual meeting. So we did send out, we went above and beyond the requirements for public notice. I wanted to show this particular map because it shows the adjacent properties. So Centerview is proposed to be abandoned right here at the turn, all the way to its western boundary of Jade Circle. So this entire segment between Jade Circle and to Centerview right here towards the east. There will be a future cul-de-sac with the development of River West Business Park. So there'll be a cul-de-sac once abandoned through the proper process. What happens to this 50-foot right-of-way is from the center line north, all of the adjacent properties to the north will receive that right-of-way, and it works the same for the southern. From the center line, the property that abuts it on the south side will receive that property once the document is approved by City Council, effective and turned over to Gaston County for recording. So we are asking that the council allow the closure of the public street after, starting with its approval. There's a lot of utility work to be done within that 50-foot right-of-way on Centerview that includes restoration of the surface itself, as well as a buffer for the residents. So we do want that work to be complete before the effective date of the actual abandonment. So the adjacent property owners to the north, they will be receiving stabilized and restored dirt, I'll just say, the land itself with the buffer. So the associated ordinance outlines an effective date of October 1 for the official abandonment of the right-of-way. That gives time for the utility work to be completed within that right-of-way. So that completes my presentation.
Thank you, Shelley. Do we have any questions regarding the presentation? And again, we have John Russell here for the developer to answer any questions as well. Attorney Russell, did you have any
So I will make just a couple comments. First, thank you to the council for hearing us, and to Mr. Miller and Shelley, this whole staff of Belmont. This is a big project, as you probably know and recognize, and there's a lot of work that's gone into getting to this point with the planning staff, with the manager's office, with the utilities department, and we're very appreciative of that. I guess I would just observe for the council or point out the project, as Shelley indicated, the conditional zoning was approved last year by City Council. State statutes require, even though all of the project has been approved, there are specific state statutes that relate to abandonment of city streets and rights of way, so that we have to come back to you for approval of specific parts of this, which is why we're here tonight to address the abandonment. Just to preview, we will probably be back next year because the project also involves relocation of two state roads that come through Acme and Quezon. That's won't happen until the new roadways are constructed, but there are certain parts of this project that are going to require us to come back to you for that. So a lot of this was actually the meetings and the information to the neighbors and the neighborhood input would have taken place last year when the matter was before you in the conditional zoning. And so all the neighbors had previously reviewed, and I think there was a petition at that time approving and actually requesting the abandonment of the rights of way. As Shelley mentioned, there is some utility improvements that are part of this project. So there's a new sewer line that's going to be constructed in the right-of-way area. And one of the reasons why the effective date is later than the abandonment date is to allow that construction to be completed before, so that then the city can reserve an easement in the sewer line, and there'll be some improvements to the water line as well. So I think that makes sense, but again, I'm here to answer any questions, and I wanted to again thank the staff and council for your support of the project and the cooperation with this project process.
Thank you, and thanks for hanging out on the line and bearing with us as we meandered through the agenda. Does anyone have any questions for either Shelley or John?
I just have one question. A couple of people up in North Belmont were just asking when they might expect to see the roads start being torn up. Is that known at this point?
So there's actually, and the developers submitted an early grading permit that I believe, Shelley, is potentially effective as early as today. They're waiting on a Brownsfield permit, which I think is coming in, and an erosion control permit. But the summertime is the most cost-effective time to do the grading. And the city's, one of the things that the city's been working on is allowing the early grading permit so that can start, I think, this month. Is that, Shelley may have some more details, but I think the intent for the demolition and the construction of the new sewer line is going to begin this month.
Yes, I would concur with that. The plans have been reviewed. We've sent our comments back to the applicant, and if they address all the comments, we should be ready to issue permits so they can start the grading.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Well, I had one. There seemed to be the resident furthest east on Centerview, I believe, had a side loading garage in the portion that's to be abandoned. And as I understood from the presentation, you all were working with him to come to a resolution. And I was just wondering what the status of that was. And I just want to make sure that by approving this, we don't end up putting that resident in a bad situation.
Well, first I'll start out with the grading plans that we have, and they have maintained access for this property owner even during the time that they're changing out utilities and removing and adding some new in this area. So that gives them time to work out that access. Again, it's proposed to be a cul-de-sac. So the easiest way was to allow a driveway right in the cul-de-sac, and their garage is right in this back area. So there's plenty of room and a means to ensure that they will get access.
So, Councilman Heffron, I think the plan at this point is to extend the driveway into the cul-de-sac using part of the Centerview right-of-way area. So that can be accomplished through a combination of, as Shelley indicated, the 25 feet that's going to go to the property owner. And then if necessary, the developer, some of their 25 feet can also be used to make sure that the driveway reaches. But that lot is not going to have to change its driveway, its layout of the garage. And the cul-de-sac, of course, will be built entirely, through existing right-of-way or some piece of the developer property.
Great, thank you. And you were saying you anticipate next year for the moving of Acme, because I got a question or two from North Belmont about when Acme was going to be moved vis-a-vis this project.
So I would like to be able to get back to you on that, if that's all right. I believe that there's a lot of scheduling, and some of those pieces are moving parts, and I don't have the schedule right in front of me as to what the dates are for the Acme and the Caisson relocations.
But clearly this is going to be done before either of those.
Yes.
Yes.
My understanding. I mean, I suppose with construction, anything can always change. It'd be really unlikely to do any work on Caisson or Acme before this takes place.
Okay. Thank you.
And again, for those two rights of way, the whole new roads have to be constructed and placed in service before Acme or Caisson can be abandoned. So it will be some time before we're back in front of you, but the statutes are going to require us to come back for that abandonment when we get there.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Seeing none and seeing that there are no public comments on this topic, again, we would need to have a motion to continue the public hearing, and the motion will need to include the day, time, and location of the continued hearing.
I'll move to. Sorry, I'll move to continue the hearing until June 3rd at 4 p.m. on WebEx.
On WebEx. All right. Thank you, Mark. Do we have a second?
Second.
Richard seconds. All right. Let's see. I guess we got to do a roll call here. Ryan?
Yes.
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 Richard? Richard? I lost Richard again. Richard?
Yes.
Yes. I vote yes. Martha? Where's Martha? Zay, yes, yes. And Mark?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Passes, and the public hearing is continued until 4 o'clock on June 3rd via WebEx. So thank you, Shelley. Thank you, John. And we will reconvene at that time.
All right. Thanks. You guys stay safe. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you. All right. That brings us to number 5. Consider an amended route for the Belmont Rail Trail. Who's going to be presenting on this? Shelley or Tiffany?
Tiffany will.
All right.
Tiffany.
So we will recognize, do we need to shift the presenter to, all right. All right, we will recognize Tiffany Farrow to present this agenda item.
Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you. Now we can't.
Yeah.
While we're waiting for Tiffany to get connected, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, and
yes.
I will introduce this item. So as you know, we have been working for many years on the Belmont Rail Trail, and it seems like every time we take a step forward, we end up taking 2 steps back on this project. So we're trying to fit all the project within the Ncdot rail right-of-way that runs on the old PNN line between downtown Belmont and Belmont Abbey, and then on to the north. And so what we have been working on most recently is a section that runs south of Sisters of Mercy and Sacred Heart campus to Woodrow Avenue, which is the area near Circle Drive. It's a constrained area that needs actually more right-of-way than the Ncdot rail right-of-way. So that would require additional right-of-way purchase from the private property owner. And we have not been able to come to agreement on that on terms of purchasing the right-of-way from the property owner. She's been unwilling to sell her property. There also are some major Duke Energy distribution lines that we estimated would be about $1.9 to $2 million to relocate. After Duke Energy did some further investigation, that is closer to about $3.5 million to relocate those lines. And so this small section of trail would cost more in right-of-way acquisition if we had a willing partner, and utility relocation than the rest of the trail would cost to construct. So Tiffany has worked with the MPO and Ncdot on an alternative route location for this project. And so that is what we have for you tonight that would essentially bypass the Circle Drive area. And so I'll turn it over to Tiffany if her audio is working to update you on that. And Tiffany, I still can't hear you. But as I was mentioning, this alternative route would bypass Circle Drive, and the dial-in's not working for Tiffany. So I will continue with this. So as you can see on the map, the rail trail would begin at the intersection of Woodlawn Avenue in North Belmont near Belmont Abbey College, would be moved from what is now Wimmer Circle to Belmont Mount Holly Road when I-85 is widened and that interchange at exit 26 is redesigned. So it moves the rail trail further from the monastery, which was certainly one of the concerns that Abbott Placid and the monastery had expressed. So this would seem to meet with their approval, that we have not shared with this plan because it's been so recent, but we certainly will do that. But it does move the rail trail farther from the monastery. It crosses over I-85, crosses over Wilson Boulevard to the northern driveway at the Sisters of Mercy campus, where it would then turn to the west and go down Main Street on the existing sidewalk network on Main Street, all the way down to Woodrow Avenue on that green line that you can see. It would then turn and go down Woodrow Avenue, just past Circle Drive and the Parks and Recreation Ford Center, and then get back to the railroad tracks on the yellow line that you see, and would curve around the railroad tracks past the police department and what is now Primal Brewery and Tech Works, coming across Catawba Street at the Chronicle Mill and ending at the same terminus that it previously was down at Greenway Street. So this route, number one, allows us to get the project started because it does remove several obstacles. And hopefully this will let us remain on our budget and timeline. So NCDOT and the MPO asked that the city formally make this request to alter the alignment for the rail trail. And if you vote in support of this, then we will take it to the MPO and NCDOT to formally request the alternative location. So with that, I'll entertain any questions you may have.
Any questions for Adrian?
I think I might have
There's Tiffany.
ability. Sorry, guys.
Councilman Swift, you had a question?
So on the south side. If in 15 years we have another opportunity to do that, could we do it, or is this like a one and done kind of deal?
You were breaking up a bit. What I think I heard you ask is if the situation along Circle Drive changes in the future, would we have an opportunity to go back and put the rail trail along Circle Drive? I would say yes. Now, we're still going to have the utility relocation issue, but if something changes and the property owner is willing to sell the property so that we can acquire the right-of-way along that red area, then certainly we can revisit it and make it a continuous rail trail.
Okay.
Amen.
Any other questions?
Just kind of an observation. Do you look at maybe completing that? It's kind of a hook down on the bottom, but just designating the rest of Main Street and over to the green area. Like, I don't know. I could kind of see some advantage in encouraging people to kind of take the trail into the heart of downtown. You hike the trail and get one of the restaurants when you're done.
Mark, I'd be happy to speak to that a little bit with Adrian if you wouldn't mind chiming in as you see fit. But one of the reasons that we're proposing the alignment to turn back onto East Woodrow would be to, one, start to highlight the ability of trail development and how it aligns with economic development at the very start of our business community there, and then have it turn so that it highlights the businesses that don't really have a lot of visibility along East Woodrow Street now. And in addition to that, by routing it back to the rail, as we have it shown on the map, it would still allow the rail trail to run adjacent to the current City of Belmont Park and Rec property for the J. Paul Ford Recreation Center, and also have it come and intersect at the rail alignment and follow the trolley alignment right next to Parkdale Mills, Tech Works, and Primal, BCO, Chronicle Mill, and eventually the Trolley Barn and Event Center, ultimately leading from the northern side to the southern side of our business district. And so we felt like this would be preferred just to give some of those businesses that are further back and not as visible some additional visibility, and to help them spur some economic development. And then in addition to that as well, when we're doing the Carolina Thread Trail funding and grants, they prefer to see things that are not always sidewalk corridors. So by having this align with the rail trail, it opens up some additional funding possibilities.
Okay, that's fair. I was just wondering.
Sure, absolutely.
Anyone else? If there's nothing further, then we'd entertain a motion.
Do we need to come out of public hearing?
We're not in public hearing.
All right, I'll make a motion.
To
the change on the Belmont proposal.
Right. Thank you, Ryan. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mark seconds. All right. Got to do a roll call. Ryan.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes.
I vote yes. Martha. Yes. And Mark.
Yes.
All right. It passes 5-0. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tiffany and Adrian.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Number 6, consider award of a contract for the Julia Avenue Culvert Replacement Project. Do you have a presentation with this, Adrian?
No, I will defer to Jerry Hatton, who will explain this project.
Okay. Jerry?
All right, thank you. This is a project that's on Julia Avenue, right about at Hughes Street, where Curtis Branch crosses underneath the existing road. It's the dip in that road, right where we put in stop signs. And the existing culvert is a metal pipe culvert that is rusting out in the bottom and is misshapen. It's a large culvert, but it's just afraid that someday the road's going to fall in on it, the end of it. So this project's been on the capital improvements program for about 5 years. Once our public works staff discovered the condition of the existing pipe, we went ahead and put it on the list. And it's been ready to bid for quite a while, but we felt that this spring was a good time to do it. And we wanted to bid it in such a time that they could do a majority of the work during the summer. When school's not in session, of course, we didn't plan on school not being in session for as long as it was. We advertised in the Gaston Gazette as required. We also had Duncan Parnell distribute plans and bidding documents. They're a printing company in Charlotte that I've known for 30 years, but in the last 10, 15 years, they've gone into web-based advertising on behalf of the city. And there's no cost to the city for doing that. They had 23 sets of plans and contract documents out to bidders. Of that, we had 9 bids, which is quite good. We haven't had that many bids in a long time. And based on that, the low bidder was Zolad's Construction. It's a company that I had not worked with before. They're actually headquartered in New York, but they do have an office here in Charlotte. It's been in business since 2013, and they do major drainage work for the city of Charlotte in millions of dollar contracts. So it's my recommendation that we award the contract to them, and we get them going as quickly as possible. In addition to their low bid of $253,850, I'd like to recommend that the council give me a ceiling figure of $300,000 for this. And the primary reason is that we have a 45-year-old water main crossing. We're crossing the culverts. We've got gravity sewer about the same age crossing, and when we've got a pump station force main crossing the culverts. We don't know the conditions of those. Contractor is aware that he's got to work around those or with those. But if we uncover them and we find out a pipe is in bad condition, we'll be able to very quickly make decisions out in the field and replace what needs to be done. So on that basis, it's my recommendation that the city council award the contract to Zolots and at their contract price of $253,850, and then further give the city manager the authority to execute any change orders that might be necessary for utility purposes up to a total project cost of $300,000.
Thank you, Jerry. Any questions for Jerry or Adrian? All right. Seeing none, I think it would be appropriate to entertain a motion at this time.
I'll move to award the contract as recommended by the city engineer in the amount of $300,000, or with a project budget of $300,000.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Richard seconds. Let's do the roll call. Ryan?
Yes.
Ryan votes yes. Richard?
Yes.
Richard votes yes. I will vote yes. Martha votes yes. And Mark?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. It passes 5-0. Thank you, Jerry and Adrian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, council.
Yeah, so I think that's an important one to get moving on.
Yep.
So the next two items, item number 7 is considered approval of an ordinance adopting the budget for fiscal year 2020 to 21. We will have to, we can't act on that until we close a public hearing. So we will defer that until our reconvening on the 3rd. And the same goes for number 8, which is consider approval of an ordinance to permanently close a portion of Centerview Street and the remaining portion of Jade Circle. Again, that public hearing was continued until June 3rd, and we can't act on that until such time as the public hearing is closed. So we will defer consideration of that as well. That takes us into our reports. Adrian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think you need a motion on both of those. Motion to defer consideration until same time, specific date, and time.
Okay. Then
to defer consideration.
Do we need separate motions?
Yes.
Okay, we will need separate motions. So let's start with number 7. Consider approval of an ordinance adopting the budget for fiscal year 2020 to 21. Is there a motion?
I move to defer consideration of an ordinance adopting the budget for fiscal year 2020 to 2021 until June 3rd at 4 p.m. via WebEx.
All right, thank you, Mark. Do we have a second?
I second.
Ryan seconds. Let's go do the roll call. Ryan?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
I vote yes. Martha? It's a yes. And Mark?
Yes.
All right, item deferred. Number 8.
I move to defer approval of an ordinance to permanently close a portion of Centerview Street and the remaining portion of Jade Circle until June 3rd at 4 p.m. via WebEx.
Thank you, Mark.
Ryan seconds.
Ryan seconds. Ryan, your vote?
Yes.
Yes. Richard?
Yes.
Yes. I vote yes. Martha? Yes. And Mark?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. That item is deferred until June 3rd. Thank you, Parks, for making sure we don't mess anything up. And now we will recognize Adrian for our reports.
Thank you. And you'll be glad to know this should be our last remote meeting via WebEx for your recent meeting. So thank you all for your patience in this tedious process. Next items are reports from various advisory boards. You have the minutes from the May 21st meeting of the Main Street Advisory Board and the the Downtown Belmont Development Association, also on May the 21st. The May 13th minutes from the Tourism Development Authority meeting, the May 20th meeting of the Parks and Recreation Citizen Advisory Board. All of those are just for your information. No action is needed on them. On the manager's report, we don't have any upcoming events because of COVID-19. Although I will say we have had 2 downtown alfresco dining events that you authorized at the workshop in the middle of May. You authorized those for Friday and Saturday evenings, and unfortunately we had both bad weather and weather forecasting on Friday, but we have had those on the past 2 Saturdays, and from everything that I have seen down there, those went well. All the feedback that I've received from city staff, from the council members who've been down there, and from the business owners, this has been very well received. You authorized this program through the end of June, and then a potential for me to approve an extension in the time of this if it's continuing to go well. So we will obviously monitor that and see if it's cost effective for us to do that, but it certainly provides a unique dining experience and a way for us to get together, practice social distancing and good practices, as Mr. Dobbins said earlier. But it's a really cool thing to do, to be able to eat dinner in the middle of Main Street. We've been working with the police department and the ABC Commission on the rules regarding alcohol sales and consumption. The restaurants were able to serve draft beer and open glasses of wine this week, and that seemed to help as well with complementing their reduced capacity inside. So this is just it's a really cool program, and I'm hopeful that we will certainly continue at least through the end of June, if not extend it into the summer, weather permitting and demand permitting. So I do want to report, you did ask us to report back on that. It is going well. I'm not aware of any incidents that we've had with it, but we did have a good crowd downtown this weekend. So thank you for supporting the efforts of the Main Street program. As we have alluded to earlier in the meeting, you have a workshop on June the 15th. That will be in person at TechWorks. We will utilize the large meeting space where you had your retreat earlier this year. The governor's order does allow for indoor gatherings for governmental purposes. There is no size limit to that, so we are exempt from the indoor limit of 10 people. But we will have social distancing, so we'll make sure that we have proper sanitation with hand sanitizer, as well as social distancing in that meeting. But that will be in person. And then I know we're getting late, and we maybe are keeping Councilman Schrift up. So I won't get into the details of everything that the city has done and that you have. Sorry, you just yawned really loudly.
Yes.
So I won't get into everything that Angela Street, who is our Main Street board chair, listed that the city has done to help keep the lights on in Belmont. But I do ask that you take a look at the items listed attached to the manager's report, because our volunteers and our staff, and certainly you, have been very proactive in supporting our downtown and our small businesses citywide. And it's been a tough time for all of us, and I just appreciate the way we've all come together to support our businesses. And it was really nice Saturday night to see we have 2 new restaurants, Primal and Jekyll and Hyde, that have opened during this pandemic. We had some businesses that had to suspend operations, and now they're back. So it's been a good story through this terrible spring that we've experienced. So I just ask you to take some time and read all that we've done, because when you put it all together, it's really impressive. So thank you all for the support that you have provided for our small businesses. And with that, I will end my report.
Thank you, Adrian. Let's see. Other business. We'll start with Ryan.
Just real quick, I think, first of all, I just want to thank staff and all of council as well. I think thinking about everybody, I hope everybody's doing well, and I feel like we're moving in the right direction with all this going on. And then I think you were made aware of the school wanting to do a parade, or volunteers from the school wanting to do a parade. Did you have any time to reflect on that, Adrian?
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up. I received an email from one of the parents of the South Point class of 2020 graduating class last night. I think she had sent that to you as well. I discussed this with the police chief, and there are some things that we can do to make this a safe procession. We can't call it a parade because the parade has some regulatory connotations through Ncdot and everything else. So we will work with the parents of the graduating class of South Point High School to have a safe procession, subject to social distancing and best practices, and with safety precautions that the police department will put in place. We unfortunately are not going to be able to grant everything that a group of parents wanted us to do, but we will work with them to have a safe procession. We will not be closing down the street per se as you would in a parade, so there's not an ordinance that you need to approve or Ncdot needs to approve. It will be more of a funeral procession. It'll be sort of like a funeral procession. It will not be a funeral procession. It's similar to a funeral procession. So I am also getting tired, Ryan. But we will work to make it a safe morning, and this would be planned for June the 13th at 9 a.m. And so the police chief and his team are working on a plan. It'll be similar to the beginning of the school procession that the senior classes have had for many years. So we are able to honor most of their wishes. And certainly we all sympathize with seniors who are graduating high school, and it's a really exciting time for them. And unfortunately, they're not able to share in this really exciting time with their friends and their classmates that they've been together with for 13 years and their families. So I remember way back in the old days when I graduated from Ashbrook, and how exciting that was. And I hate that these kids don't get to experience that. So hopefully we can make their situation a little bit better that morning.
Thank you. Richard.
Yeah, I'd like to lend my support to that procession. Whatever we can do to make that happen and be safe, I would support that. At our MPO meeting, our bike ped planning grant was approved. There was a resolution issued. Mark Stafford, Division 12 DOT, did say at the meeting that they would get back on their regular grass cutting schedule. I thought he said this weekend. I'd have to look at the minutes to check, which is good news, because traveling up the Black Mountain this past weekend, I did see a lot of high grass on the interstates, but a bright spot is on I-40, the DOT was rallying a lot of equipment there. Looks like in preparation to start cutting grass, so hopefully they will be getting that sooner rather than later. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Richard. I will just add to what Adrian had mentioned about the downtown and the alfresco dining. They were also, we were selling the DBDA and the Main Street program. We're selling some, I shouldn't say selling, but for a donation of $25, you could get a Belmont Strong t-shirt. And I know as of the first weekend, they had raised just $700. Just on Saturday alone, they had raised $700, and there were more people down there this past Saturday. So I don't know what their numbers are yet, but all that money was raised in support of our Main Street businesses. So that was encouraging as well. I'd wondered about the water cutoff, but Adrian, you answered that question in the course of one of your other presentations. I'd still hope that we can get interviews scheduled for open board positions sooner rather than later, because it's starting to have some effect, I think, on some of the boards as things are ramping back up with everything. And thanks everyone for bearing with us. There seem to be more technical issues on this one than in some of our previous ones. So I'm happy that we navigated our way through some of the procedural intricacies that meeting remotely have engendered, and I look forward to seeing everyone in person going forward. So thank you for that. Charlie.
Well, first of all, I want to say our hopes and prayers go out to all the people that are victims of the coronavirus. I thought Chris Dobbins did a great job, but I also feel like it's important to mention the fact that we have a situation that we've been blessed with of not having any criminal activity during this last week or two. And it's been pretty bad watching this stuff on TV. So we hope and pray that the police can control everything throughout the country and people will be safe. Because so many people have lost their businesses, and we don't need that happening here, especially. So that's all I've got to say.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Martha. Okay, nothing from Martha. And Mark.
Yeah, well, I would just reiterate what's already been said about the alfresco program. I think it's going about as well as, excellent, really, is kind of the word that comes to mind. We were out there last weekend and just had a blast, just kind of seeing everybody and getting something to eat. And, Winston got to run around and didn't have to worry about all the traffic downtown because, the streets are closed. So it was great for everybody. Along the lines of, as we kind of get back to normal, I know we had a lot of things that we had sort of planned to discuss earlier in the year. I know there was a rather large parking lot from our retreat. And then, Jim and I both, I know we had some items that we were interested in discussing. I had some neighborhood safety questions. The police department did a couple speed studies for me back in January, and really like a chance to go over those with the whole council at some point. I'd hate for that work to go to waste. So as we get back to normal, just want to make sure we're not forgetting about those things. And then just one question. I've gotten a few queries about any plans the city may or may not have for the 4th of July. Do we have any idea what that may or may not look like at this point?
Councilman Seelinger, I'll ask Phil Bogan and Cassie Lackey to provide a more detailed answer that I can send out to you later this week. My understanding is we are still planning to have a fireworks show. We're probably not going to be able to have the Red, White, and Belmont event that we had hoped to and have done the last several years with a large concert because of social distancing.
Right.
Hopefully we're in phase 3, and so maybe we can have something. But we felt like having the fireworks display at least will give us, some sense of normalcy on the 4th of July. So we are planning to do that.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear, because I know that I would agree. I think a lot of people would just appreciate the moral boost, even if that's the only thing we're able to do. That's it for me.
All right, very good. If there is nothing else, I think we need to have a motion to recess until 4 o'clock on Wednesday, June 3rd, via WebEx, rather than a motion to adjourn. So I would entertain such a motion at this time.
Mr. Heffern.
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's Chief Hawkins. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I would just like to take just a minute to speak to the council and the manager and our citizens about the recent events in our country. And I would like to say that as a professional police organization, we're in totally disagreement with the actions that's happened with the law enforcement agency across the country. And we want to ensure our citizens that we are doing everything we can to prevent such actions. And we are totally in disagreement with everything that happened there. And I know there's a lot of questions. I've filled a lot of questions. I know probably many of you have. We have put a lot of training, as Mr. Miller has put that out to y'all recently. We do everything we can to prevent such actions as that. But I just want the council to know that we do a lot of training to prevent things such as that, and we are totally in disagreement with that. And we do everything we can to support our citizens and to work hard to make sure our citizens are safe. And I just wanted to put that out there to let them know that as Belmont Police Department, that, one, we love our community. We work hard to do everything we can to support our community. And I want our citizens, if they have questions, please reach out to me. And we want them to know we support them and that we do everything we can to protect our citizens and to make it a safe city. And that, I just wanted to put that out there, that I would just, if anybody has questions, please reach out to me and let's have conversations. I think that's very important during this time in our country.
Thank you, Chief Hawkins. Well said. And we certainly appreciate all the efforts that you all are making for Belmont and all the training that you've undertaken, which allows you all to avoid the situations we've seen in some of these other jurisdictions. Mayor, Adrian, did you have any?
Mayor, do you have anything to add?
I'd just like to say, I appreciate what the police have done. They've done a tremendous job keeping us safe here. And that's all we can ask for. And thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I would, not to belabor the meeting, but I went to the police station last week, and to a person, they were disgusted with what the Minneapolis Police Department did. And they all knew better than to do what happened there. I'm proud of the training that we've done, that Chief Huggins has instituted. The emotional intelligence training and the racial intelligence training and the de-escalation training is something that he brought with him and implemented on day one 3 years ago. And our department is set up to succeed. We focus on community policing and community engagement. We have a downtown officer. We have officers that go into neighborhoods. We try to form relationships with people. Policing is a messy business. If everybody just follow the rules, we wouldn't need to have law enforcement, but unfortunately they don't. And they have to do their jobs with professionalism, and they are under a microscope. They've been put in a terrible position the last 2 or 3 months, having to enforce unpopular orders related to COVID-19. And now 1 or 4 bad actors have ruined the reputations of every police officer and every police agency, and that's horribly unfair. I've been in conversation multiple times every day with Chief Hawkins, and I'm really proud of the work that he and his staff have done. They've had some long hours the last few days helping protect Charlotte and Gastonia and other areas. They're put in an impossible situation, and I appreciate the work they've done. And on the other hand, there are some legitimate, long-standing, terrible issues that we have to work through as a country. And I'm hopeful that if anything, what we've seen in the last week says we still have a lot of work to do as a country, and we have to be able to listen to each other and be empathetic to each other and work through these issues peacefully and be very intentional in how we listen to each other and talk to each other. And so I'm hoping that there can be something positive come out of all of this. But it's ugly out there right now, and I'm proud of the work that we're doing, and I just appreciate all the support that you provide to the police department. So I will end it there.
Thank you. Well said. If there is nothing else from anyone, we'll entertain a motion to recess.
I'll make the motion that we stand in recess until 4 p.m. June 3rd via WebEx.
All right. Thank you, Richard. Is there a second? Ryan. Seconds. Roll call. Ryan.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes.
Jim votes yes. Martha. Yes. And Mark.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone. We stand in recess until 4 o'clock on Wednesday. We'll see you all by WebEx, and then we will start getting together in person again. So thank you all, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Good job.